Today, we are diving into one of the most intense and dramatic developments in the Middle East in recent memory. The situation has taken a dangerous turn with Qatar's so-called revenge, as Arab fighters launched hypersonic missiles on Tel Aviv after earlier strikes on Jerusalem. This escalation has shocked the world and raised fears of a much larger conflict spreading across the entire region. The attack on Jerusalem was already a major flashpoint that created outrage and emotional responses across the Muslim world. Jerusalem has always been at the center of disputes, symbolic for religious, political, and cultural reasons. The strike on the holy city inflamed tensions beyond anything seen in years. Following this, the Arab fighters, with Qatar's backing, intensified their response with the launch of advanced hypersonic missiles targeting Tel Aviv, which is not only a major city but also Israel's economic and technological heart. The use of hypersonic missiles is what has truly captured global attention. These weapons are not just another piece of military hardware. They represent a leap in warfare capability. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles, hypersonic weapons travel at speeds many times faster than the speed of sound and have the ability to maneuver during flight, making them extremely difficult to intercept. For Tel Aviv to be struck with such weapons marks a turning point in the kind of technology now being deployed in the conflict. It demonstrates that the Arab coalition, and Qatar in particular, are ready to push beyond the limits of conventional warfare to challenge Israel directly. Tel Aviv, usually seen as modern, vibrant, and relatively secure, was shaken to its core. Civil defense sirens blared, people scrambled to shelters, and the city was thrown into panic. Images of fireballs lighting up the night sky spread rapidly across social media, fueling both outrage and fear. The Israeli Defense Forces scrambled their Iron Dome and David's Sling missile defense systems. But hypersonic missiles present a new challenge, testing the limits of Israel's famed defense shield. The Israeli government called emergency meetings, declaring that the attack represented a new level of aggression that could not go unanswered. For Qatar, this strike was framed as revenge, a statement of defiance against Israel's strikes on Jerusalem. It was not just about military retaliation, but about sending a message to the wider Arab and Muslim world that Qatar was willing to stand up and strike back with power. This development highlights how regional politics, alliances, and grievances are now converging into a single, explosive confrontation. It is no longer just Israel against one group or one faction, but Israel facing a coalition empowered with advanced weaponry and backed by wealthy states, capable of sustaining long-term conflict. The symbolism of attacking Jerusalem cannot be understated. To the Arab fighters, defending the sanctity of Jerusalem is a cause that unites millions across different nations and sects. The attack on Tel Aviv that followed was framed as a proportionate response, not only in military terms, but also in symbolic power. It was meant to demonstrate that if Israel could strike at a holy city, then its modern capital was not beyond reach. This tit-for-tat escalation has dragged the conflict into a dangerous spiral where restraint is unlikely and where revenge becomes the guiding principle. Internationally, reactions poured in immediately. The United States condemned the missile strike on Tel Aviv while simultaneously urging Israel to show restraint to avoid sparking a wider war. European powers expressed alarm at the introduction of hypersonic weapons in the Middle East, warning that the region was sliding toward an unprecedented level of destruction. Russia and China, on the other hand, issued carefully worded statements, emphasizing dialogue, but also signaling that Israel should reconsider its actions in Jerusalem that provoked such a severe backlash. The United Nations called for an emergency meeting, but even diplomatic voices admitted that the conflict had already gone far beyond what statements and resolutions could calm. Inside Israel, the government faced enormous pressure from its citizens. People demanded security, revenge, and strong retaliation. Politicians lined up to call for decisive military operations, with some even suggesting that Israel consider escalatory options that had previously been off the table. The Israeli military began to mobilize, deploying forces across key fronts, preparing for a long confrontation. At the same time, the political leadership debated how to balance the need for strong retaliation with the risk of triggering a full-scale regional war. For Qatar, The missile strike was not simply about one battle. It was about positioning itself as a leader of resistance in the Arab world. Qatar has long used its wealth, influence, and media reach to shape narratives across the Middle East. Now, by sponsoring or supporting such a bold strike, it signaled that it was prepared to put itself at the forefront of the anti-Israel struggle. This not only elevated Qatar's role, but also put pressure on other Arab states that had normalized relations with Israel in recent years. Those governments faced angry populations demanding they take action, making it clear that Qatar's move could shift the political balance across the region. The use of hypersonic missiles also raises major concerns for global security experts. Until now, only a handful of nations had operational hypersonic capabilities, including Russia, China, and the United States. The fact that these weapons are now appearing in the Middle East raises questions about how they were acquired and who provided the technology. Some analysts suggest outside powers may have quietly transferred such weapons to their allies as part of their own strategic competition. This means the conflict is not just local or regional, but tied to larger global rivalries that could drag superpowers into direct confrontation. As the dust settled in Tel Aviv after the initial strikes, the world watched anxiously to see how Israel would respond. Would Israel launch an immediate and massive retaliatory strike on Qatar? Would it target Arab fighters across the region? Or would it bide its time, carefully planning a response that would send its own message of deterrence? Israeli leaders made clear that the attack would not go unanswered, but their exact course of action remained a matter of speculation. The uncertainty only added to the tension as people in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Doha, and beyond braced for what might come next. The human toll of this escalation was also significant. Families in Tel Aviv spent sleepless nights in shelters, fearing more hypersonic missiles could rain down at any moment. In Jerusalem, people mourned the earlier attacks that had provoked this cycle of retaliation. Across the Arab world, people celebrated what they saw as a bold and historic moment, finally striking at the heart of Israel with advanced weaponry. The divide between perceptions and realities only deepened, ensuring that the conflict was as much about narratives and symbolism as it was about physical destruction. Meanwhile, oil markets trembled, shipping lanes faced disruptions, and global investors grew nervous. The Middle East remains the world's energy heartland, and any conflict that threatens its stability immediately ripples across the global economy. The idea of hypersonic missiles flying over major cities in the region spooked markets and pushed up energy prices, creating another layer of global consequence to this regional war. As the hours turned into days, one thing became clear. The strike on Tel Aviv marked a new era in the Israel-Arab conflict. This was no longer about sporadic clashes, airstrikes, or ground operations. It was about advanced warfare, global alliances, and existential questions for both sides. Qatar's revenge had opened a chapter filled with uncertainty, danger, and the potential for unprecedented destruction. The situation continues to unfold, and the world holds its breath. What began with strikes on Jerusalem escalated into hypersonic missiles raining down on Tel Aviv. Where it goes from here could redefine the future of the Middle East and reshape global politics in ways we cannot yet fully imagine.